For those of you that have your Bibles, or you can just follow along, of course, the obvious up on the screen, turn in our scriptures to Matthew chapter 18, verses 21 through 35. Let me make sure I'm all wired up here. Here we go. Then Peter came and he said to him, Lord, if another member of the church sins against me, how often should I forgive? As many as 7 times? And Jesus said to him, not 7 times, but I tell you 77 times. For this reason the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his slaves. When he began the reckoning, one who owed him 10,000 talents was brought to him. And as he could not pay, his Lord ordered him to be sold, together with his wife and children and all his possessions, and payment to be made. So the slave fell on his knees before him, saying, have patience with me, and I will pay you everything. And out of pity for him, the Lord of the slave released him and forgave him the debt. But that same slave, as he went out, came upon one of his fellow slaves who owed him 100 denarii. And seizing him by the throat, he said, pay what you owe. Then his fellow slave fell down and pleaded with him, have patience with me, and I will pay you. But he refused. Then he went and he threw him into prison until he would pay the debt. When his fellow slaves saw what had happened, they were greatly distressed. They went and they reported to their Lord all that had taken place. Then his Lord summoned him, and he said to him, you wicked slave, I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. Should you not have had mercy on your fellow slave as I had mercy on you? And in anger, his Lord handed him over to be tortured until he would pay his entire debt. So my heavenly Father will also do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother or your sister from your heart. And so is the reading of God's holy word. You know, this is a parable. It's not a literal story that took place. It is a story that Jesus is trying to teach Simon Peter about what it means to forgive. Tradition that Peter had come up with was 7 times, which was a very generous donation to forgiveness. Think about it. How many times are you willing to forgive someone that has wronged you? Many of us have a hard time forgiving 1 time. We'll hold a grudge forever. Are you that person? You'll just hold a grudge forever. You never forget. You may pack it away somewhere. You may act like you're over it, but inside it is just seething, waiting to come out. You're just waiting for them to mess up again because you know they're going to. You know why you know that? Because they always do. Have you ever known that person? They can't help themselves. They are so repented one time, and they're so sorry, and what do? They end up messing up again. A lot of us have children like that. I was that child. I couldn't help myself. I'd walk right into the stupidest things sometimes, and I wouldn't care how many people would warn me, you go down that road, this is not going to end well, Steve. I'd just laugh at them. And it didn't end well. And somehow my Father always found it in him to have mercy, bailing my sorry back end out of a lot of problems and troubles. Or my mother just refused to give in because she just knew, she saw, you know, a mom's love. Everybody else will say, that is one crooked, sorry young man. And but I love him. I know the good part of him. Have you ever said that about one of your children? I know the good part. You always look beyond the problems and you always see the good. That's a mother's love. Simon Peter is saying, hey, 7 times. Thinking this is very generous. And it was. According to the law, it was very generous. But Jesus then pushed him even further and he says, you know what? No, not 7 times. 70 times 7. So what Jesus was actually saying to Simon Peter is, always. You never stop. It is an always continuing thing. Now that seems extravagant, and it is extravagant. But if you think about God's love for humanity, it's extravagant. God's love for humanity is that he never seems to give up on that troubled child. You notice? He waits. He's merciful, and he's patient. And so Jesus is trying to teach Simon this. So he told this parable about this king. Now, this king had all these servants. Now, the servant wasn't a slave. A servant was actually an official person that worked under the king. The difference is that he was official, whereas a slave would have just been told to do what and never would have been given anything for their efforts. This man had a salary. He was part of the team. He had a position in this man's life. And so what did he do? He squandered the money and the management of that money beyond belief. Up to 10,000 talents. Now let me explain, let's just a little bit to understand the literal interpretation of these talents. The talent was the largest monetary unit in their system of money. 15 years of manual labor equaled 1 talent. The annual tax income for all of Herod's great territories was 900 talents a year. This man owed 10,000 talents. Think about this. 10,000 talents would exceed the taxes for all of not only Herod's territory, but Judea, Samaria, Phoenicia, and multiple other surrounding countries. This man had a debt he would never be able to pay. And what he had done is he had squandered, or he had stolen, or misrepresented and taxed people way beyond what they were supposed to pay, even for Herod. And he piled it away in his own little account. And now, what has he done? He's spent it all. There's nothing there to pay, and he has been found out. This is not good. This is not going to end well. This is the scandal that hits the papers. This is where people go, hang him. That sorry guy has been taking money from me, and he has squandered it like that? So he goes, and the king says, then it's going to require everything you have to pay this back. And that means your wife and your children and all that you possess. Everything you have that's precious to you now belongs to me. And the man falls to his knees and he asked for mercy. Now the king in this story, heart opened up to him, and he forgave him the entire debt of 10,000 talents. Something he could never pay back. That's terrible wrongdoing this man was guilty of. He wasn't saying I'm innocent. He's saying I'm guilty. I've been caught. I have been exposed, and here I stand before the whole world, shamed. And now the price is everything I have, including my family, will be taken away from me. All I can do is ask mercy, because there is nothing left. I have no excuses. I'm crying mercy. And this king not only was merciful, he was beyond merciful. He forgave all of it as if it didn't exist. You have a new beginning. You can start afresh. Wow! What do you do with that? How do you thank somebody for something like that? It's sort of how I feel when I know that my Lord has forgiven me and washed me clean of some terrible sins of my past. Same thing with you. I want you to think of the worst offensive thing you think you've ever done toward God. I don't want you to shout it out. I just want you to think about that and know that God has washed it clean. He says, I am going to forget it as far as the east is from the west. I have forgiven. And not only do I forgive, I forget. I wipe it clean. It's all gone. It's never going to come back. You are innocent. How do you thank God for that? What words do you use to thank the Almighty for that kind of mercy, of forgiveness? Where do you begin? You want to know why I serve God? It's not only because God called me. It's because I'm in debt up to here. And I don't do it in fear. I do it in gratitude because He washed the debt away. He cleaned the slate. And I didn't deserve it, folks, no more than you do. He was merciful to forgive. Now, the story goes on. It doesn't stop there in the parable. Because now, what do you do with what God has given you? Now, what this slave did showed that he was just unrepented. He was grateful for the mercy, but he was unrepented. He didn't turn. He didn't move in a new direction. He took the gift of God. That's how a lot of us want to do. We want to take God's gift of love and mercy and grace and forgiveness, but we're not willing to give anything in return of our life. We're just going to continue down the same track we've always gone. We're not going to make any changes. And we're just knowing that God is a loving God and He's not mean, and He would not ever perish and push me out into the outer limits. After all, look at how merciful He's been. You know, our God has been merciful to this world. And this world is very undeserving of that mercy. I've often wondered, Lord, how much longer before you return? How much longer are you going to tolerate our sin? How much longer are you going to be patient with us? He has been very merciful. And how do we thank Him? We just go a step further away from Him. So what did this man do? This man went and he found a slave. Now, seeing he was a servant, he found a slave that owed him 100 denarii. 100 denarii was a lot of money, but it was nothing compared to 12,000 talents. And he says, I'm come to collect. I want what was owed me. And this slave fell to his knees and he asked forgiveness. He said, would you have mercy on me? I will pay you back, but be patient with me. I just don't have it. I'll pay you over time. I'll pay you back. I'll do whatever it takes, however long it takes. And this man said, absolutely not, and he had him thrown into prison. And until you have made up that debt, you will stay in prison. Now, he made it impossible for him to even work to raise the money to make up this debt. So the man's going to sit in prison the rest of his life. His family's going to suffer. Everybody around him will suffer because of this man's greed. He still didn't receive the money, but out of spite, he had him thrown in jail. And rightfully so. He could do it legally. He showed no mercy. Now, the other slaves saw what had happened, and then what happened? They start talking. And they're saying, did you see that? I remember when he was before the king, and he had squandered 10,000 talents, and then asked for mercy, and the king granted mercy to this man. And then for 100 denarii, what did he do? He throws our friend in jail for the rest of his life. He showed no mercy. Did this man not learn anything? Sort of like the Christian who claims to be washed in the blood of the Lamb, but shows absolutely no mercy or forgiveness to those around him or her. One of the reasons the church has such a bad reputation is because we shoot our wounded that come to us. We make them an example. We get on our stump and we feel self-righteous and we say, well, look at the sin that they've committed. How many people in here know a person who have just made bad mistakes in life and they died? And all they are remembered for are the bad mistakes they made in life. When people talk about them, they don't talk fondly. They don't remember all the space of time and places where that person tried hard. Their life is defined by one sin that they committed and remembered that way. Do you realize how cruel and how unmerciful that is? Isn't it good that God does not see us the same way? Because I promise you, folks, all you saints of God that believe, death comes to us all. And I want you to think of the ways of which you have let God down. And if it wasn't for His mercy to look beyond it and His grace, this is a story of grace, this gift of life He's handed to you so that when you die, irregardless of the mistakes that you've made in your life, His grace will prevail in the end. You gave your heart to Him, but you still sinned, didn't you? We've all sinned since our new birth, haven't we? Let's be honest. None of us have arrived. There are people that I meet along the way that are trying hard. They opened their heart up to Jesus. They started going to church. They started doing good things. They got involved in the church family, but yet the demons of their past haunt them. They're still not perfect. They still make mistakes. I had a friend in Cherokee like that. When he died, I heard people talking, oh, I think he died an overdose. Well, you know Bob. But what they don't remember is Bob knew Jesus. And Bob wasn't perfect, never claimed it, but he claimed a perfect God. And I was with him when he opened the door of his heart, so I know he's in glory. Not by anything that Bob could ever have done or do, but because of what Jesus did and continues to do. My dear friends, I've been forgiven, and you have too, for things we should never be forgiven of. We are just like this slave. We're praying for mercy. But you don't want to be like that servant who received mercy and shows no mercy later? This is a question we deal with all the time. I'm asked all the time, how do I forgive those who have wronged me? No one said it was easy. You're not vindicating them saying what they did was even right. What you're doing is you're forgiving as Christ forgives you. You're forgiving because unforgiveness will destroy you. Unforgiveness will make you hard. Unforgiveness will make you like that man that held that man and put him in prison. Unforgiveness will bring hate into your heart, resentment and bitterness. And those things will destroy your soul. See, forgiving is not just for that who cries for mercy, but it is also for those who grant it. So that you don't live your life with that heavy weight on your heart and soul. I know it's not easy. No one said it was easy. You're not justifying the wrong that was done against you. What you're doing is you're showing that there was a loving God that forgave you and showed mercy to you. A loving God that has forgiven you multiple times. A loving God 70 times 7. Over and over and over, He's been merciful. And we are to do the same. We say this because this is necessary for the church to hear. We all need to hear this. I need to hear this. This is the kind of God we serve. This is what gift has been given to us, and we are to give it back to others. We are to love others as we love ourselves. Do you love yourself? Some of you are saying, you know, preacher, the one thing you forgot to talk about is how do I forgive myself? That is my greatest demon. Then I want you to pray that God forgive you for unforgiveness of your own heart. And you keep praying it until it's granted. You pray, oh Lord, forgive me for my unforgiveness of myself. Set me free once and for all. I don't want to live with this burden anymore. I've had to pray that prayer. And you keep praying it. It's amazing. Forgiveness is part of the faith journey, part of being a Christian, part of being a follower of Jesus. And Jesus is trying to teach Simon Peter, Simon, there's something bothering you and it's just not going away. And it's because I know your betrayal will follow you. It won't go away overnight. Remember when he met him after and he asked him, do you love me? 3 times. Seems as if Jesus was rubbing the salt in the wound. What Jesus was doing was trying to heal the hurt because he was depending on Simon Peter to be the rock of the church. He didn't want him to be burdened with that old memory any longer. Same with you, my dear friends. So when you ask me the question, why should I forgive? I want you to think of this story. I want you to think of what Jesus has done in your own life. I want you to think about purging the soul of unforgiveness because it will destroy you. I promise. It'll destroy you. The Word of God for the people of God. Amen.